Hi folks, Paul here and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at boiling water using primitive tools and techniques. In my opinion this is like the holy grail of the outdoorsman's or outdoors person's skill set. Being able to make a container that can withstand fire, that is large enough to be able to produce enough drinking water that it's worth a while, and one that's robust enough for you to be able to use again and again and again. Just using natural materials is, in my opinion, the peak of sort of being comfortable outdoors. So in today's video I'm going to show you exactly how I go about doing that, and then we'll sort of talk through the process afterwards. So I appreciate you taking the time to click on this video, and I hope you enjoy. Okay folks, so I'm out at my local stream, and although this water is really nice and clear, it runs off a man-made loch and the surrounding area is very much all farmland. And so while this water is really nice and clean, at least visually it's nice and clear, there's not much debris in it or anything like that, what I might not be able to see is any sort of pesticides that have been used farming in the local area. Any sort of waterborne viruses like Giardia. The loch this water is running from actually has an algae bloom in it at the moment, which again can make you very sick. And then of course you've got all the sort of bits of debris, that man-made nonsense that ends up in rivers, as we all know. So it's pretty much essential that I boil this water if I want to drink it safely. And to do that I've pretty much got all the primitive equipment I need to do. I've got my big pot here for boiling the water in, my fire kit here as well, and then a little tray to work on, and then my bowl which sort of doubles as my cup for drinking out of. So that's pretty much all I need to boil water. that and some rocks, but as you can see I'm surrounded by those, so that shouldn't be a problem. So with all that being said, I'm not going to kind of blab on too much. I'm just going to crack on, and hopefully the whole process is sort of self-explanatory. If there is anything that I think needs to be cleared up, I'll come back and I'll talk about it. But yeah, I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Okay, so the fire has been made. I made that using iron pyrite and amadou with a piece of flint. A really useful way of making primitive fire. For me, it's just so much more effective than, say, friction fire. As much as I love hand roll and I can do it quite proficiently, in this environment, particularly in the UK, where it's very damp and humid all the time, especially in Scotland, pyrite and flint is just a much better option because it is totally waterproof. So I can dunk my pyrite in my flint in this river, take it out again, and then start using it straight away. So it's typically what I go for. It's not always the quickest, but it's pretty much surefire, at least as far as primitive technology goes anyway. So now that the fire is established, I'm going to spend a bit of time getting it nice and big, and then we're going to select a few rocks from around the local area. I'm going to make sure I pick the ones that aren't in the river. If you pick a rock that's in the river and then put it on the fire, what's going to happen is all the moisture inside that rock is going to want to escape as it turns to steam. It's inside a rock, so it's not going to be able to do that very easily, and the easiest way it ends up being able to do it is just to explode. So you really do not want to be using wet rocks, so I'm going to have a look around for some nice dry ones and I'll show you what they look like. Okay, so the fire is raging away over there, and I've come into the woods a little bit and been digging around under some tree stumps and that kind of thing, and I've come across some nice round rocks. Now, the shape isn't very important, but quite often it tells you a bit about the structure of the stone, so I can feel this is a very dense stone. The reason that's important is I don't want anything porous, so something like sandstone or even flint, which can have cavities in it, chalk, that kind of thing. I don't want that because, again, the air inside those cavities will heat up and expand and want to go somewhere. Has nowhere to go, so it just blows up. So these hard, round, old, worn rocks are perfect. Another important thing to note is to check that they actually fit inside your container, because many a time I have gone to heat up some rocks to boil water and then noticed that my rocks are either too big or far too small for the amount of water. For me, the way I sort of gauge, if you like, is to just compare the stone to the size of the base of the pot, and if they're about similar, then it should be kind of good to go. So all we've got to do now is place these on the fire, collect some water, and then wait. There we go, that'll do her. Doesn't need to be a lot, I just want to make a little bit of tea, so just enough to sort of quench my thirst. So I'll sit that at the side, and now all we have to do is just wait. Okay, so I think we're about there. As you can see, the fire's been going for a little while. The rocks are buried at the very bottom, right in the middle of the fire, so they get the most heat. And it's usually a little bit easier to tell if they're ready or not at night time, because you can get them to the point where they're glowing red hot, which is ideal. During the day it's a little bit more difficult to tell, but for me, I tend to make a fire, you know, fairly big and then let them sit in there for maybe 10-15 minutes and then come back to it. So I reckon this should be good enough. The other thing to point out is that I've only put 2 rocks in here. Of course it's always better having an excess rather than needing them afterwards, just because they do take a while to heat up. And I've had it where I've tried to boil water before and run out of hot stones, unfortunately. So you kind of end up with warm water, which defeats the point. The goal here literally is to boil this water to a rolling boil to make it nice and clean for us to drink. So with all that being said, I'm going to try and dig these stones out and put them in the fire, or in the pot rather, and we'll see what happens. It can be quite an aggressive process, so you just want to make sure that your pot is in a good sturdy location, otherwise the movement from the water can actually chuck it off. Now this is also my first time actually using this particular pot for stone boiling, so it could be there's a flaw in this pot that I don't know about. If there is, then we'll find out about it in a minute. But it should be absolutely fine, I think. Now these rocks are unbelievably hot and they'll hold the heat for a super long time, so a good pair of picking up sticks are necessary. It's always very exciting when you first drop a stone in. There we go. So I'll let that sit there, and it should kind of slowly start to heat the water. And then once that's been in there for a little while, I'll get that one out and then put the next one in. You can see it's starting to steam there already. Okay, so with that one stone, the water is already hot to the touch. So I think if I put that next stone in, we should achieve a boil here. So there we go, it's been boiling for maybe, I don't know, say 5 minutes now. You can see the bubbles are just starting to subside, so it's cooling down a little bit now. But a good rule of thumb when it comes to purifying water is big bubbles, no troubles, which means if you get your water hot enough to the point where it's boiling really aggressively, then anything that's in it should be dead and it should be safe to drink. So obviously this pot is now very hot and I can't really drink out of it very easily. So that's the reason I have this secondary bowl here, and this again just sort of acts as my my drinking vessel. So what I'll do is I'll make a space for this next to it, and then I'll just carefully kind of tip some water into it. Now remember, this is a big, essentially a pan of boiling water here, so It's very important you are as safe as you can be. I'm going to use a stick to push it here. There we go. And then from there I have a bowl, or what is essentially for me a cup of purified water that I can add berries into, leaves. I can process materials with hot water. I can even use it for cleaning myself, you know, having a nice hot wash as it were, instead of the cold stream. It just opens up so many different possibilities in terms of resources and materials. But the main thing it does is obviously stave off dehydration, which is one of the quickest ways you'll perish out in nature. And like I was saying at the beginning of this video, being able to process water in this way using just purely natural materials is like the holy grail. So if you do fancy setting yourself a challenge, then I would say this is the way to go. But I'm going to go and find some nettles or something to put in this, make a bit of a tea, and then I'll bring you guys back and we can close off the video. Okay, so there we have it. That's essentially it. It's a really quick and easy process. I could of course just put the pot on the fire, but that's a much riskier process, just because clay is porous, so it absorbs moisture, and if that moisture is evaporating out of the clay too quickly, then again you end up with cracks and pops and everything else. So having the hot rocks introduced to the water is just a safer way on the pot. You do have to be careful about dropping them into the pot, but the pots are sturdy enough that they can take it, so just something to be aware of. But all that being said, I've managed to find some nettles. I've made a bit of a tea or a soup here, and it certainly tastes nice enough, and I literally can't stress it enough. Just the whole premise of being able to have something hot, warm and wet outside using primitive techniques is just such a kind of a niche thing. You don't really see anyone doing it, and it is, in my opinion, the greatest test you can give yourself. So if you feel inspired by this video, then my advice would be to get out and try and produce a container of some kind and see if you can boil water in it, and leave all of your modern equipment at home and see how you get on. It's taken me a long time to kind of learn all of the skills that have gotten me to this point, but it's nice to be able to do these things and show that kind of they actually do work, are effective, and they're worth pursuing. So for me, that is what bushcraft is about, whether it be primitive or just your normal run-of-the-mill bushcraft. For me, it's being able to walk out the door with nothing and be perfectly fine, and that's kind of exactly what this is. But all that to say, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Rock boiling isn't something you see very often, so I thought I would just do a quick little thing on it. I hope it's been useful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to taking this stuff out again sometime soon, now that we've got the pack ready and we've tested our kettle, as it were. Then I think we're pretty much set to go for a bit of a hike and a camp, so that might be the next video, we'll see. But thank you for tuning into this one, and I'll catch up with you all again soon. Cheers!